Ooh, look at that.
Yeah, I
Lake Tahoe.
got my tourist hoodie on.
Nice.
I bought it from a ski shop in Tahoe, and the guy was just looking at me like this, and I was like, "If I buy this and wear around, will everyone here know I'm a tourist?" And he was like, "Yes." And I was like, "That's what I'm going for." It's like buying an "I Love New York" hoodie in New York City. It's like that's what I want, man, because everyone in New York's gonna think I'm the coolest guy ever. It's like, what? You went to Tahoe? That's awesome. That was fun, man. I had a good week. We got the pod out last week. We got videos out last week.
Yeah.
It was good. I had aspirations to make a video while I was there. I brought my camera, but I just took some
like
footage.
on the slopes.
Yeah, and just like at the airplane, like last year I did that. Remember, I like got a bunch of footage of me on the airplane and stuff, and like hacking on the next rewrite of my personal site.
Oh, okay. I was trying to remember which video that was.
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't have anything on IT, do I?
You're good.
Okay. Just making sure. I think it was like the next rewrite, but yeah, I chose to relax instead.
Good.
It was pretty fun. I went with some guys who like go on ski trips a bunch, and they're like really big into cooking.
Yeah.
So like the first day we get there, they always do like a grocery store run, and just like my friend Jason is like an amazing cook. So it's like complete opposite of when I went with other friends. Like when I go like my other friends, it's just like you think about that stuff at the very last minute. Everyone's starved. It's like, all right, let's just go get a burger somewhere.
You go to like the restaurants on the mountain. There's like 2-hour wait and
for
you're
like a nasty burger.
Screw it. We're just gonna eat like gas station food.
Exactly. But dude, he got like Chinese vegetables. He made like ribs one night, steak one night. It was awesome.
God.
Big Airbnb with like lots of leather couches, and like it was a pretty awesome trip.
Nice.
It was fun. Hit 36 miles an hour on a snowboard too. That's pretty dope. It's actually like the first real time I got to try my new snowboard that I got this year, because we went to Park City in December or November. Yeah, December, I guess. And but it was like the snow was so bad. It's been like such a light season. But Tahoe was pretty sweet, man.
Nice.
Yeah. North Star and Heavenly. It's pretty good stuff. You said you went there.
Yeah, I went to
Years
school
ago.
in the Bay Area, so we used to go out to Tahoe. So
That's awesome.
That was like my first time like snowboarding too. So kind of spoiled.
Yeah. Right? Compared to East Coast, it's really good.
Yeah, I've only skied on the East Coast. I've never snowboarded, but I can imagine how snowboarding on the East Coast would go.
Yeah, especially when you're learning and like you have those narrow trails, and like when you're trying to navigate and you're learning snowboarding, it's crazy hard. It was fun being like a little bit better now. And there were some of those, like, I actually love those trails that are like hairpins almost. And they usually go like around the edge of the mountain, and there's like lots of trees and like the best views across the edge, but they can get a little tight even in the West Coast, you know? But once you can actually like cut both ways, narrow, and go around people, it's pretty satisfying.
You know, I think I did one of those in Tahoe, and it was like too advanced for me.
Yeah,
I was like, okay,
your calves are burning because you're not going fast enough, and it's like
just got to go like slow.
Yeah,
and like there's someone behind me.
Like, yeah. It was so fun though.
Did you do like backwoods at all, like go off trails?
Not really. There was I was getting a little playful like in the last few runs because it was like actually big enough, and it wasn't like. I think like Vail has like the back bowls that's really popular. Okay. That's like I've seen some of my friends on that on like Instagram, and it's like you're in trees, not like glades, but like you're just on the side of a mountain that's like not groomed, and it's like fresh snow, and it's like there's trees, but there's enough room to kind of go in and out. And this was kind of a mix between that and a groomer. So, but there were some parts where you could like kind of go in between trees, and I would like go up on the side and kind of be able to turn, which was fun.
That's one thing I remember. Like people would like, I'd see them cut into trees and they'd come flying out, and I just whoa.
It's a lot. I wasn't quite there, but I'm definitely getting like better each time I go. The first place we went to, North Star, had a half pipe. And I almost had the courage to do it, but I like had 2 big days, and I was like, I need a break, and I'm not quite there yet. But I think after we went to Heavenly and I was like feeling comfortable just going on the sides and stuff, I was like, I could have done that if we went back and not gotten air, but just figured out when like, cause if you're approaching it like on toe side, and then you need to do a fast enough turn, you switch to heel side at the top, like at the crest of when you go up, cause you switch your board. It's like doing a cut, but doing it really fast, and your board is like this, and then it's like that. And I kind of did that. I think I would do it. I would go really like, I wouldn't go big. I mean, there's people doing like, they look like they were in the Olympics, you know, they were getting air and like doing grabs and spins and stuff. But yeah, something to work towards. There's always something to work towards in snowboarding, like programming, which is what this podcast is about. Look at that segue. So yeah, let's see. What did I do? My video last week was I took a break from suspense, and I talked about the promise, the loading spinners and next. Someone on Twitter was talking about use deferred value. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I looked at that.
I actually haven't looked at it again since getting home and sitting in front of the computer.
So I'm probably going to butcher this. The deferred value lets you basically opt in to getting a value from a transition that's suspended. So it lets you basically opt into like an inconsistent UI.
Okay.
I think for like your example, you want, like the ideal case would be like you transition with the router.
Right.
That suspends until the router has fully navigated to that page.
Right.
And then you render. I think if like you start using deferred value like this, you're going to have a value that captures the next ID. You're going to have a value that captures like the current ID, but the router is going to show the next ID.
I see.
Something like that.
This is a part that a proxy. You need like a proxy value that's like acts deferred, so you can like keep rendering the old data or something.
Yeah. So what would it be? What would the deferred value be? I guess the deferred value would be like the old value.
The old value, and then you have to look up in the cache for like that data, so that post or something.
Right. So the router would have the new value.
I see.
And so like this, you can see how this is letting you opt into an inconsistent state. It's letting you opt into
router
transition.
being one value and the UI showing something different.
But I think when you do this, like you don't want, now no one can like safely use router in your app because they're going to get a value that has that's like off in a suspended version of your app.
Yeah, now you have like a use stale router hook, and everyone just is like, "Who the heck wrote this?
Use
What's
my
his
router."
home address?
Yeah, so I think there's I think the answer here is like Next's router when it
becomes
works
suspense
when it works with
transition
suspense,
compatible. Didn't you say you went and tried it with React Router and like it actually worked with Navigate?
Yeah. React Router, it worked out of the box. So you can start transition, and inside of a transition do a navigate. And let's say the page you're navigating to suspends because it's loading data. The UI won't render for that page until it's unsuspended.
That is awesome.
So you're off loading it, looking at the
parallel universe is
parallel
loading
universe.
it.
Yeah. So you're on blog post 1, you want to transition blog post 2, you do, router, you use navigate.
Right.
And you call navigate to post/2, and you won't actually go to that page until all the data is loaded.
Does that mean the navigate function is calling set state somewhere?
Yeah. So I think it has to. I don't think there's any other way you can do this. I started looking at their code, and they have there's like they have like the React Router, then React Router browser, and then there's another package called history that like syncs these things and syncs the history state. And it looked like they're like just giving set state to that.
Right.
And so, I was really impressed.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with React Router and how it just worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made a video last week about transitions.
Yep.
So if you want like more clarity, we'll link it in the show notes.
Absolutely.
I have a demo. I made a code that I walked through in the video. In the GitHub repo where that code is, there's an app component that I use, but I also have in that repo app with router, and it is the video, but with React Router.
Oh wow!
And you can see how it works.
And
cool.
So it's a demo from your video. It works, but it happens to be tied to the URL.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I wanted to like do this in the video, but when the video ended, it was like a really good spot to end.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to throw like, I wanted to show it like, I wanted to show React Router how awesome it is.
Right.
But it didn't feel natural. So,
right.
But in the demo, in the README of the demo, I was like, if you're playing with this demo, change app to app with router and have your mind blown.
Yeah, that is cool.
It is mind blowing to see it all.
That's awesome. Yeah, man, I watched your video when I was out in Tahoe. Actually, it was really cool. We have talked a lot about suspense and transitions, but it was cool to see it in action since I haven't played with it yet. Dude, when you like make the transition take a long time and you can still interact with like the current tree, it's really cool. And the parallel universe, you said that that's how they talked about it in some of those guides, right?
In one of the guides, they use like in another universe.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good term.
It's really cool. Yeah, we were talking about that, how that's like, you basically have like a clone of your app. And
yeah, just like, so you want to go to some new piece of state in your app. You use startTransition, and then whatever that state update would normally do, let's say it causes your app to suspend, React is going to like run that app in the other universe.
Because it doesn't know whether it's going to suspend or not without running it.
Right.
So it needs another container to try.
Exactly. So it's going to run that thing in the other universe, see that it suspends, and then not apply the state update on the app on your screen until the thing unsuspends.
Right.
And the idea is like, by the time it unsuspends, you've put that data in a shared cache.
Right.
And now you can safely set state in your app without triggering suspense.
Right.
And so it looks just
without any asynchrony, without any pausing, any possibility for yielding or anything like that.
Right. It's so funny because like when you're in React 18, you're still doing like async renders.
Right.
In that no matter whenever you call like set state, your app can yield to like a higher thing. Like even I believe that if you call set state and you trigger a re-render, those re-renders aren't guaranteed to be synchronous re-renders in React 18. So React can start rendering a tree.
Now, is that true for the IO bound stuff? Because I was looking at some of Dan's demos. You know how we were like clicking some of those demo links in the kind of outdated guides and they weren't working? Mm-hmm. He had some code pens that I was putting in Slack that were like, that worked because they were from like the August 2021 post. And he was explaining how like if you have 500 milliseconds of work to do in a thread, you still have 500 milliseconds of work to do. But if you can put different points within it where you can split it up into 5 chunks of 100 millisecond work, then you do have a program that can yield.
Right.
But with the IO bound stuff.
Wait, with that, you can, the splitting is components. So if you have one component, it has to render like top to bottom.
Even if there's multiple start transitions in a component?
So let's just
assume
no transitions.
Okay,
like we're in a world with, so this is where it gets, there's async rendering outside of transitions.
Okay.
So I believe, I might be completely wrong about this.
Yeah, we're figuring it out.
I believe that when you render, right now in React 17, when you render, it is top to bottom.
Yeah.
So like
tearing is not a possibility at all.
JavaScript is single threaded and you just go top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I think in React 18, when you render, maybe they render like 3 components and then they say like, oh, I need to go check and see if there was a set state update.
Mm-hmm. Or keystroke or something like that.
Yeah. So it's like an update that, and then I can start rendering again. So I think, and the boundary is, my understanding is components. So if
I thought like if you had different components that suspended, and which is what you need to do to give an opportunity to yield, that the other universe wouldn't stop until the whole tree had finished suspending.
So that's what I was talking about is like the CPU bound stuff.
Okay, but
now there's like another side, which is the IO bound stuff.
But you can't have the CPU bound stuff without a transition.
I think
React can only yield if there's a transition. I think you have to opt into concurrent rendering via transitions or suspense. And when it's the CPU bound stuff, it's transitions.
That may be. This is I don't.
Yeah. We'll have to test that.
I do know React can render, check, continue rendering the tree, check, continue rendering.
We'll have to read more about it. My understanding was the suspense stuff would suspend. Because when you suspend,
there's 2 types of yielding. I've been rendering this tree of components and it's taken me a while because they're like really CPU intensive components. So before I start rendering like the next half of the page, I'm going to go make sure there aren't higher priority updates that I need to apply.
Yep.
And so this is why like just like filtering a really long list is slow. And then when you use transitions,
I think
it's
I'm like
fast.
90% sure you need a transition for that to be true, because a transition is how you mark an update as low priority. By default, everything is high priority.
Right, but I don't know, even if you have no transition, if that makes the next render completely sync.
I think it does, because they're all urgent. Because there's no way to schedule without a transition.
You're saying, okay.
I'm pretty sure I read that, but yeah, we'll have to test it. But in any case,
and then the second half is like suspense acts as like a natural spot to yield, where if you hit a suspense boundary, that app is basically going to, your on-screen app can apply other state updates, and you can discard the suspense.
Yeah, I wonder if that's considered yielding though.
It is. They say there's like two types of yielding.
Interesting.
There's like
yeah. You're right.
Yielding, and then there's like the suspense yielding. So
interesting. Stuff is so crazy. Anyways, yeah, we'll definitely link both of them. Yours was really cool because I hadn't seen that. But crazy stuff, man. Yeah, he had a cool demo with the tree, the fractal tree that has to render, 1,000 polygons, and so it takes time. But you can make it so the slider, which sets the number of polygons, is more responsive than the actual thing, and it just feels a lot better.
Right. So I think what's going on with that one is you're rendering like 3 polygons, checking for state update, rendering 3.
So like every 5 milliseconds, React will just yield back and see if there's a higher priority thing. So
so
the set of the range slider is the high priority thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that tells React that like this tree that it's been
so the rendering is a low priority, which means you're using startTransition on the rendering, like set polygons 1,000. That's the low priority thing. That's what you're wrapping in a transition. Because a transition is how you say something's low priority.
Yes.
And that way it will say, do we have enough power? Do we have enough resources to run this transition? If not, then we'll throw it away.
I don't from like my exploration last week, I don't really like the term. I know they fit, but I don't really like the terms low priority. I know it fits, but it's more, I am transitioning to this new state, and I'm going to do it off screen, and I'm going to do it in small chunks.
Yeah.
And in between those small chunks, I'm going to check
for
other state updates. And if those other state updates occur,
it is confusing because they say it's low priority, which is their way of saying it can get discarded.
Yeah.
It's more important. Other state updates are more important than this one, but then they call it a transition. So they say something like updates fall into 2 categories. One is state changes fall into 2 categories. One's like a state update and one's like a state transition. So that's kind of weird nomenclature. So why are they calling it a transition? Why does transition mean low priority? Or if you don't like the term low priority, what term do you like? Like throwawayable or something, like discardable? And if so, why do they call it a transition? Why does transition mean? There's some reason to it, because they said a lot of the vocabulary comes from like design and trying to cross the bridge with the designers.
That's what I read, was like these were like, I think there was a thread on React What G that says WG working group.
Yep.
That says something along the lines of like there were animation terms, or I don't know.
Like we're transitioning to a new screen, but you would never say like I'm transitioning this range slider to another value. So it's like you set the range slider and then you transition this table to a new version. So maybe that's like where the term came from or something.
Yeah.
And it's like, transitions that are stale aren't as important as like setting the range slider, which is like an update. So like we want the updates to be responsive, and then the transitions can be like discarded. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like you're transitioning in the sense that like you're going to go try to render the thing.
Right.
And then in another universe, and then render it in your universe, or apply it to your universe, or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's just say render in your universe.
Yeah.
So I think like there's a notion of like, it can be discarded, it can be thrown away. With a sync state update can't.
I guess to me the word transition doesn't inherently signify like if I complete the login, if I complete sign in, I'm transitioning to like the home screen. That in and of itself doesn't signify to me like, this could be discarded. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to like, if they said like low priority update, like why isn't it just called like low priority or discardable or something like that?
But low priority is like, confusing because if I'm doing like let's just go back to like the route transition. If I'm doing like a route transition or
Yeah,
whatever,
you said this. The product person would never say like it's
this is a low priority. It's like, no, this is a high priority. They need to end up on that page.
Yeah.
And so
maybe that's why.
It's really
it's
like
not about saying that it's going to be inconsistent and they won't end up there. It's just about saying if another thing takes precedence over it, it'll get discarded or something like that.
I mean, really, my mental model for this is like, we're going to try to set this state update in another universe, and then we're going to see what happens in the meantime.
Right.
And so yeah, sometimes like in their demos, they like the use transition React hook is kind of like the use state React hook. It returns a Boolean of whether you're pending or not, and then returns a function to start transitioning. And that function, in my video, I call it start transition. That's what the docs do. But in their demos, they'll sometimes call it start refreshing or start loading,
navigate or like
start navigating. Yeah, so
change ID or something like that.
So maybe there's like
start right.
Yeah, maybe there's something there.
Start
navigating, start refreshing.
It's that's true. Maybe like the designer would be like, so when they click this, like we start logging them in, but if they hit the back button or click cancel or something, when they hit submit, we start submitting. But if they were to change the query, then like you would want to start, maybe something like that. That's interesting. Oh, that could be it. That kind of makes sense to me. Yeah, cool. I saw like some comment from Sebastian that was like, oh, we should have called like fallback skeleton instead. Because they were talking about all this, how all these terms should tie back to like product terms, and design. Yeah.
Skeleton's really interesting because they use like skeleton to mean like you don't show the suspense boundary.
Right.
In some of the docs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like you have
I thought the suspense boundary would be the skeleton version of what's going to be in the content once it has its data. Like
I have to go look at it. The term. There's always like this when I'm reading these docs. There's like a translation going on in my head. Like what is happening? Like in
the UI,
there's a transition where I'm keeping my app in its current state, and I have like a is pending, is loading, is refreshing Boolean that I can use to update the current component that's rendered.
Right.
It's transitioning. I know it's transitioning, but I can display something. The other thing is like. I'm going to a new state, and that new state causes me to suspend, and I have no control. Like I'm just rendering I'm like giving up control, and the suspense boundary is taking full control. And I think they use skeleton for one of those. And yeah, when you play with the examples, you can kind of start to see. Dude, this video is great. It made me appreciate transitions and like understand what's going on. And there was some like more stuff I dug into with like. The cache. I didn't do this in the video, but like really helps you appreciate like why suspense, and like when people say like suspense won't be ready for data fetching or data fetching won't be ready for suspense, whatever the term they use is, you can kind of start to see when you play with these things.
The missing piece.
Yeah. How would you deal with this? And areas where you can
right because you update the cache. There's a shared cache with all the end universes that are being attempted to being rendered. And so, if you end up discarding it, but you need to like evict the cache, how do you do that?
Yeah. Exactly. So like you want an off-screen app to suspend and in a transition so that you can like just keep the UI rendered as normal on screen. But if those two things are sharing a cache and you blow away a cache entry and your app has to re-render, you're just
because of another click handler or something.
Or just like it has a hook and that hook gets an update and all of a sudden you're re-rendering, and now like you're re-rendering from a shared cache, but you had to delete that shared cache. So another app could suspend and it's just, it gets hairy. So,
oh yeah. So yeah, totally. Your video made me really wish that I could have used start transition, because basically my video was like, how would you do this today without React 18 concurrent features? If you wanted to basically block rendering a new page, and like if the next router worked with transition, it's like literally a perfect thing.
Yeah.
You want to preload it and you want to show a spinner on the stale UI that something's happening, and then you don't want to, it's like literally perfect for it.
Yeah. It made me realize that like in React 17, you have to describe the transition. Like you have to describe all the steps to transition. In React 18, You just say, I would like to transition to this state.
Right.
And React figures out the in-between and what should be shown.
Right.
And then when it's ready, it transitions to that state.
It's amazing.
There's a lot to do with the cache and the data fetching stuff. There's a lot. Those are like
foot guns,
really hard problems that they have to solve.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to take a while.
Yeah.
And I also think like they should take as much time as they need.
Yeah.
Because this is like, we have ways to fetch data in React apps, like use SWR is pretty good. And those things support suspense. And for like the hairy, like I want to transition to a refresh and I need to delete a shared cache. We have ways we can deal with that today where we can just get back like a revalidate or a refetch from our use data hook.
Right. We're not using concurrent features is fine. It's It's like,
but yeah, you can see doing this transition stuff made me realize like, yeah, there's a lot here that needs to be figured out. And I can see why they're hesitant to say
it's ready.
It's not ready.
Yeah.
And then just like little side piece here, as I was reading through a bunch of stuff about this concept of server components kept coming up. Server components have the same problem. Server components need to support this. And I couldn't figure out why. I was like, why? What am I like? Why is server components have this issue? So I downloaded the server components demo.
Oh, cool.
Again. And
the one from Dan's talk?
Yeah. Dan and Lauren's talk. And I went through it. And man, the first time I went through it, like back when they did the talk, I didn't understand any of this transition stuff. So I was like hyper focused on like, oh, look, you can write SQL queries and components. And like you can, but I realized that like, the server stuff is the exact same as data fetching. They're like literally the same problem, which is just so mind-bending.
Like it suspends during...
So you're writing a React app. You have like component A, that's just a client component. And then you have component B. And inside of that, that's like a server component. It just has components that need to run on the server.
Mm-hmm.
So you start rendering that and like React has to render. Like it has to render. It can't not render.
Mm-hmm.
And it hits the component B, which is a server component, and it needs to like go to the server.
So
and have the server exactly.
Oh, really?
It needs to go to the server and have the server generate this tree.
Yeah.
So the idea is, and this is all like in app code.
It's running at runtime. It's not build time. It's runtime.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not build, but this is in the application.
Yeah.
So the application says like, I need to go to the server.
It's basically making a network request. You don't know
exactly.
Yeah.
But you kind of do know it because it is in app land. It's like makes a fetch request to the server to get the React tree that it should render here.
Turbolinks.
I mean, it is.
Yeah.
So it makes a network request to the server to get this, and React likes to use this like a pattern of returning objects that have a read function, and that read function basically wraps a promise, and if that promise isn't ready yet, it throws.
Mm-hmm. Which is reading from a stable cache or whatever.
Exactly.
Like,
So they do that. They do like server
HTML cache dot read.
It's not even HTML when you look at it. It's like an actual React tree.
I see.
Like, if you were like console.log children.
Result like React.create element.
It's
like arrays of P's and like children and props and stuff. Yeah.
It's a thing where it's like they have like symbol and name and type. But
output of a JSX of a return JSX.
Exactly. So it wants to insert that somewhere in component B. It wants to draw that server generated React tree. But it's not ready, so it would throw while this thing is being fetched from the server. So it literally throws, which is going to trigger a suspense boundary.
Okay, wow.
Now, fetching from the server, fetching like a React tree from the server is so fast that in their demo, their suspense boundary for like the initial thing is just no fallback. It's just so fast you don't even notice it. And then their suspense boundary for like, they have other suspense boundaries for... Their app is like a notes list. So you have like a list of notes on the left, and then on the right, it's like you can edit the note and see the note list detail view.
Mm-hmm.
In there, they'll like those fetches, those server rendered things could take a while. So they have
like a server component that like talks to a database.
Yeah, exactly. So they have a fallback.
Okay.
Now, once you've generated this,
pretty cool.
Once you've generated this server JSX. You don't want like every state update, you don't want to have to go to the server because remember, React is just going to re-render top to like hook functional components. They just render top to bottom. So you don't want to have to go to the server and ask for the JSX again. You just want to say, yeah, I already fetched this JSX from the server. So I'm going to throw
for like this component in this position with these props or something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
For this page.
Okay.
So they throw it in the cache.
Okay.
So
how do you know if it's fresh? How do you know if it's the right one? Like if I go to like the notes list component and it's like a data fetching component in the server, like how do I tell it I need to refetch it? Is there like an API for that?
This is where the cache API, the React cache API comes in. And this is like the same API that you would use for data fetching.
Data fetching cache.
Yeah,
oh, wow,
so you can see they're the same class of problem. And like this was a moment for me.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
There's some really cool stuff they do in this React Server Component demo. Whoever made this thing is like, I like to think like we're React developers. We think in React, like our mental models of how React is pretty good. This person is like another life form. Like I don't know if it was Dan and Lauren or I know Andrew talks a lot about it, but this app, they have the people that worked on this app in the README. It's like Dan, Lauren, Andrew, or someone else, but it's really, really cool.
That's awesome.
So you have these server generated JSX trees in a cache. And so if you go to a page that you've already fetched from the server, you can render that. And
it's the JSX. It's the return value. It's not the instructions. It's not the JavaScript code.
It's not
the actual.
If you made a component that was like that took children and then you console.log children, it looks exactly like that.
Gotcha.
And that gets like that gets insert. You basically like render. You know how you can do like
but you get the children. You don't get return children. Like.
You get the children.
Exactly.
You get the children.
Whatever the children was at the time that the server rendered that component.
Right.
Yeah.
And that component.
And it gets cached.
That the server renders. This is also the little detour here, but that component, that the tree that the server generated can include calls to client-side components.
Oh, wow. Right.
So you can mix.
So they could have like dynamic parts in them in the sense that they're going to render like on the client. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is crazy. That is crazy. I mean, you're literally not breaking the React model at all.
Right.
It's just that you have to account for the fact that it's like an async component now.
Right.
Why don't they just call this stuff async? It's so much easier. Anyways, yeah.
So now you have a cache with a bunch of these pages in them. So I went to notes/123. That JSX tree is in a cache. So when I need to render that,
it'll be instant.
I can pull from the cache. So let's say I have like some client-side state and I have a button where I'm just like incrementing a counter.
Yep.
Well, the server generated stuff is in a cache, so I can just render there. I don't have to go to the server every time and say, I'm going to suspend while I'm asking you to generate this. Okay, so let's say you're going to update note 123. This is this. Yep. Okay, so you make
change the title or something.
Change the title.
You
have an event handler that's like on submit. It's a
publish
form.
True or something.
Yeah. So you're going to make a put request to the server, and the server is going to there's an Express Node.js handler that's like going to go to the database and change that title or publish that node or whatever you want to do. When the server responds, it's going to generate the React app for that page. So you're on note 123. It's going to generate the React app, that JSX tree, and send that back as a response.
Okay.
And then
how does it know which it's just going to render from top to bottom, or you hint which components depend on the thing you just changed?
So it in this demo, it renders from it just renders the app on the server.
Okay.
And it's going to respond with that JSX tree. In your on submit thing, you get that JSX tree back, and then you put it into the cache.
Oh, really? You put it into the cache?
You put it back into the cache. So now you have the new version of Notes 123 page, and then you can navigate to Notes 123. Maybe you're on Notes 123/edit, and you want to navigate to Notes 123/view.
I was thinking you were going to say it does a diff or something to see if it's.
Maybe there's
in their example, you just put it in the cache, you update it.
They say there's optimizations and this and that, but
how would you, I'm just curious. Yeah, I have to look at it. But if this component over here updates that causes this component to change, you're just saying you would get for the current route.
So you basically, so let me back up a little. You're saying you're making this put request to edit this post. You edit the post on the server, so you write it to the database, and then this route handler on the server is going to respond with the JSX tree for notes 123/view.
Yeah.
You get that back as a response. You put it in the cache, and then you navigate to notes 123 view. So like you just it's if this is the thing that blew my mind. It's like exactly like a Rails app, because a Rails app.
I was just thinking about Russian nesting.
Yeah, well, a Rails app would, if you're gonna, you make a post request and the server responds with HTML.
Right.
Like that's or like it responds with a redirect or whatever.
Right.
But the idea is like you end up at a response that has HTML in it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
But it also reminds me of the Russian doll nesting from Rails, because you mark which parts of the app depend. Basically, what's the surrogate key for this part of the app?
Yeah.
And this part of the list, it's like EmberMap. The list of all notes has a key of note : all. The detail has a key of note : 1. If you make a mutation to note : 1, this one you have to regenerate, and this one you have to regenerate, because the keys point back to the model that has changed.
Totally.
It's a similar idea. I mean, it sounds like
theirs wasn't that granular. Theirs is just
the whole thing.
Re-render the entire page and then put that page in the cache.
I know, but you're putting away a current page. There's other pages in the cache, let's say.
Yes.
And you're not replacing those.
No.
So that's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's like there is some mechanism by which you say, for this change, here are the entries in the cache that I have to change. Yeah. And you can imagine it becoming more high level.
Yeah. I see. So if I edit a note, the server kind of has knowledge of like, oh, you're going to go to this page next. So I'm going to give you that. I'm going to generate that page on the server and give it to you so that when you navigate, it's in your cache.
Because if you created an issue, or you marked an issue on GitHub as closed, and you regenerated the current page, and then you go back to the issues list, it's going to be stale. So you should have regenerated that one too. So how do you tell it to do that? Because it depends on that data. So, maybe you start by doing it manually, but then maybe eventually you get to some API like this.
That's probably why in this demo, the list of notes is always rendered.
Exactly.
There's not like, you do like the list detail navigation.
Right. Yeah, pretty cool though. I mean, very cool.
It's super cool. Yeah. I think this stuff is very far away.
It feels like there's a lot of different things. It feels like the server components thing feels like a level 2, whereas like the suspense, getting it working with the cat, because like it's kind of like you were saying, like we do suspense with data fetching so much, but there's really nothing inherent about suspense that has to do with data fetching, and there's nothing inherent with transitions that has to do with route navigations, right? So that's kind of the interesting thing. These are like very general purpose abstractions, and you'd think that they could, but I guess these are like ways of testing it out. It's pretty interesting though. It's a lot.
Yeah. So I've always like had this view, like this is how this playing with this server component demo would kind of change how I thought about React. So I've always had this view that like you are building an app and someone wants like a fancy drop down, or they want like a fancy WYSIWYG editor, and like React just wins. Like front end developers just want to use React, and I don't need to argue why.
Right.
This app ends up being a React app.
Right.
And so there's so many things that happen because of that. Like you now need like an API. Right. You now need an API. Like you need a GraphQL API. You need a REST API, whatever. You need an API, and you need ways to communicate. And you kind of have two apps now. You have a back-end app and you have a front-end app. This made me kind of realize that you can get, if you like squint hard enough here, you can get like the best of both worlds. Yeah. Where that you don't need an API for this. Like the servers just,
you don't need to know about it. There's like, they can abstract the API away, because there is an actual API. Your front end app is making a network request, and there's like, your client code is running and your backend code is running. But
it's different from like you're setting up a GraphQL server. You don't need an API endpoint for like listing all notes. Totally. The server can just generate the React tree for all the notes list and respond with that.
It's an implementation detail. It becomes implementation detail.
And it made me think, so we've in the past, we've talked a lot about like inherent complexity versus essential complexity.
Incidental versus essential.
Do you want to explain those?
Yeah. Essential. We heard this from like the folks on the Ember team. I think it was Ed Faulkner. But essential complexity is what it sounds like. Incidental complexity is complexity in your app or code or infrastructure that's like actually just there as an incident, as a side effect of how you've chosen to set things up. So like if you have an inconsistent API, and you have like REST collections, and like sometimes you like do a post request to create a user to /users, but then other times you do like a put request to like /create note endpoint. There's a lot of incidental complexity because of the inconsistency. There's nothing inherent in the notion of like REST or API design that would lead you to have to deal with that, but that actually ends up being a big part of it, and that's the incidental complexity.
So I used to think that like having a GraphQL server was essential complexity because you're building a React app. It's like a client-side app. It needs to fetch data. Like this is a pattern that you're opting into, and you get all these great benefits from it. But the server components demo made me think like, oh, actually it's incidental.
If you have a powerful enough abstractions built in that are flexible into React, then like you're able to do everything without actually needing that.
You don't need like
you don't need to talk about protocols.
Because if React can respond with the JSX tree that you're supposed to render when you edit a form, like you don't need a GraphQL server. You don't need all these layers, and it really made me like. It made me think like, wow, like
that's pretty cool.
I could see us just writing like 80%, and this is going to sound crazy, but I could see us just writing like 80% server components, like our buttons or our, well, I guess buttons would have like on-click handlers, but I don't know, like our headers and our layouts and our, you're rendering a post.
Current user or whatever.
Yeah, all that can be like just a server component. But then when I do need to make the drop down, that's when I use state. That's when I have React. Again, I think this is like
a long way away.
Do
you think like frameworks like Redwood and Remix that basically give you like a loader and like a submission actions in the same files as your components are kind of trying to do the same thing where they're like you don't end up writing API endpoints because they have conventions that basically let you abstract that away?
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't really think about that. That's a good point. Like you're not setting up a separate server, even though you are.
Right.
I would say like you're always like you always have this tension with these things where you're trying to synchronize the database to some like client side data store. Like you're responding with JSON objects and you're putting them into a store, and then your app is re-rendering based on those JSON objects. And there's always like this tension that like you can't put your entire database into that store. It'd be so much easier if there was just like sinkhole database.
Right.
But you can't. I mean, you can't. It's not realistic. So I think this like the server components completely sidestep this, and they just say, no, you're not going to maintain like JSON objects. We're just going to give you back the JSX
current version
trees.
of the page. Yeah.
And again, like. There's something sweet when you're writing Rails apps that you just respond with like
the
like
view
data that I fetch from database dot first name,
right
user that I fetch from database dot first name. It's this stuff is tough because like I get real excited, but the reality is like I know. First of all, I'm sure like they made this demo, they're getting tons of feedback. Who knows what ideas are going to stick?
That's cool. Pretty cool, man. I need to take another look at it.
I think too, like understanding the transition stuff, I went in with such a better like, I actually see what this app is doing now. I actually see why.
Just like playing with transitions and suspense for months and then going back to it with the context.
Yeah. Where I think this talk came out like a little over a year ago, and it was just like, SQL queries and React components. That's awesome. Yeah. But this is like, I think it's deeper.
Because I remember
my appreciation now is
that's cool. I remember hearing it and hearing the main benefit being touted was the ability to not ship code to the browser. And I was like, I don't care about that. Like the apps we work on with teams, the stuff we do ourselves, like complexity is the biggest thing. It's not about
bundle size.
It's not for us.
I think what I got out of this time was not having to like synchronize JSON objects across the wire. And that, I mean, come on, we see mistakes there
for sure.
all the time.
For sure.
That's where complexity lives.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool, man. That's very cool. No, there's a lot of fun things. We're still making videos. So that's, there's plenty with startTransition to still dive into. There's plenty with the cache and the server component stuff will be fun to dive into too. That's cool. What were we going to say?
I was going to say too, like these the fact that server components like generate a JSX tree, it's
Nerd sniped you.
It's just
like cool.
Well, I would also like, oh, I thought these were like for like an SSR thing because my code only runs on the server. And it's true in a sense that your component is only running on the server, but the return value isn't HTML.
It's like a data format.
It's
like
yeah.
JSX,
it's like,
a data format.
Yeah.
But it's not going to include a call to like prisma.find. It's going to include a call to react.create element
with the value.
Yeah, with the value. Yeah,
exactly.
Prisma.
Yeah. Oh, also too, when just one more thing, when your server components suspend, your client is going to render the suspense boundary.
Yeah.
And then as they unsuspend, they're going to get responses and the client is going to render the responses. So you actually see like the suspense boundaries get rendered and unrendered, and then deeper suspense boundaries get rendered. So it feels like your app is just running on the server and the server is just pushing down updates as things suspend and unsuspend. So like the actual like data fetching and stuff does happen on the server, which is a point. Like these are components that run on the server. Where, you know, like just like if you think about like Next.
But you're saying you wouldn't be able to tell a difference if it was actually just doing data fetching on client suspending. It would look the same.
Yeah, it would look the same.
Yeah.
Where we always think of like, oh, like you have to prepare all your data and like get static props or get server side props, and it's like
blocking
single shot.
Yeah.
There's no asynchrony because you have to get that.
No, this is what it uses the component boundary. Like you don't lose any flexibility, composability because it's happening at React component level.
So it's yes.
And if you get used to building your UIs with suspense, it literally doesn't matter. Like you could have a list component that uses SWR that suspends and it renders a spinner, or it could go to the server, and like that's amazing. Like, yeah, the fact that you can do that is amazing, and like. That is cool if you had it fetch like the markdown source from a database and then it wanted to render it with like into HTML with like a markdown, what do they call it? Like a syntax highlighter or something. So you want a syntax highlight and you have a client side component that does that. It suspends and then it calls, whatever. What are those? What's the libraries we use to like syntax highlight it? Highlight.highlight, HLS, whatever. And then it's doing that on the client, but now you just move it to change it to server, and it's like your suspense boundary is already outside of that component.
Exactly.
And so you don't know any difference, except like now you aren't shipping highlight.js there, and the browser gets to do less work on the user's device, which could be really good.
Yeah, you're running on the server, and like maybe you can cache those results on the server.
Right.
Like you can put computation in Redis, and
yeah.
Again, these are like a lot of problems we don't face, but it was cool to me to see like why the cache matters for data fetching, why it matters for server components,
that is cool.
How these two things take advantage of it. If you're transitioning to a new server component page, you want to have the server prepare that, put it in the cache so you don't suspend when you start rendering that. Same thing with data fetching. And so that was kind of like
that is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. You can kind of, and this was where I was like, okay, suspense is like really more than just like throwing a promise while I fetch data.
Right.
This is like a whole way of thinking. Like, I'm not ready to render. Am I like, what do I
like
show?
It's really going all in on the component as like the boundary of like rendering and computation in your app. And like now that you can just it's pretty crazy.
Throw those anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, you could have a server component that like renders a view app or whatever, you know what I mean? Or renders something else and it doesn't matter, and then it returns it. But like it's kind of like the front end developer's dream because you're still thinking like that's like a React component that other team just gave me, or it renders something crazy. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really good,
I mean, because like, so does your server component can't do like some work on the server and then some work on the client, right?
So the way it can
render client side.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how they split it up. So
you could like fetch a session or something and like see if they're authenticated on the server. Like you could check if you're on like an intranet for a company or something like that.
Yeah.
And then like choose to render like the admin panel or something. And if not, you couldn't.
Yeah.
But it's pretty cool. Like you can do everything you can do on a server.
That's really good. So like the component, it's like React doubling down on the component,
as the
not saying like
boundary.
There's like a new interface for server generating code. It's like, no, we're actually just going to have a way for you to just drag and drop components between server and client.
And like it's again, it's the composability aspect of it, because you don't have to do like, what was it with Fastboot? You had to do like, Ember app fastboot.render, right? That was like the one API.
Yeah. And it gives you back HTML.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is cool. It's cool when you get it working, because you're running the same app, different app is in a different environment. But it's pretty cool that you could just do this at like a Leaf component. You know what I'm saying?
The difference here is
composability.
Like Fastboot and all the server. As anytime someone says SSR, it's about getting HTML that you can then rehydrate. Right. Where React server components are about just kind of like running components on the server and sending their data down to the client and having the client render them.
Right.
Really, really cool. I mean, part of me, like, I feel a little guilty talking about this. I spent a ton of time. We're not going to be able to use this for a while. We wouldn't use this in consulting projects just because it's experimental. So new.
I wonder if you could, like, if you have a client component, do you mark things as client components or do you mark things as server components?
They marked things as client and server components on this demo.
And then if you leave it alone, it's like the normal version.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could start a next app with like just a client component and then it would never run on the server. That'd be great, actually. Like, because you know what I'm saying? Trying to guard it. Like, it'd be actually nice if you could say, don't even try to pre-render this.
No, this is like the thing that another thing I wasn't understanding.
The build time versus runtime thing.
It's not
rendered to string.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about generating HTML. It's about where these components run and how you can move it between client and server.
Right.
But by the way, too, in learning all this, there's an awesome remix blog post about like why server components aren't ready.
I meant to go back and
so I read that, and basically they say like their take, and they're coming at it from like they have their remix product that does something different. But it's like you don't actually get these performance improvements. It's still slow. You're still going.
They're not interested in it right now.
It's not like an optimization where like we would say like, oh, SSR is an optimization because you can like get stuff to the client faster. So they like compare it to like their nested routes and their data loaders. And it's just, there's not a lot of benefits.
Overlap from once you're using a more opinionated setup that lets you already do work on the server.
So I was kind of like, okay, that's interesting. I guess I can see this, but
Next is really excited about them.
Yeah. Also, too, like I got excited. I think you kind of put my thoughts into words, but the fact that like the component is the unit and you can run it anywhere. To me, that was the exciting part. I don't think we're gonna get like, the way that Remix kind of evaluates this, it's kind of like, oh yeah, maybe these aren't that great. Right. Also, too, like this is.
But you're saying there might be more to it than just they're focusing on like the benefits that Remix provides, like the speed, and they're saying from that perspective, it's not something that's super interesting to us right now, because of the way we are solving these problems.
Exactly,
today.
Being charitable.
Yep.
The Remix article, I don't think is being charitable to
the amount of use cases maybe that server components will give.
Yeah, or like what the demos of these server components are trying to do.
Yeah.
They compare it to a different demo that I didn't use, so I don't know.
Might be missing something. But what about Next? They're interested in integrating it. Would it remove the hooks, like the get server side props? Because you would just, if you needed like a component that needed server side props, you would just like make it a server component.
You make it a server component,
and then you just like do it there.
I think if you want,
I mean, that's cool in the sense of like, I feel like anytime a framework can remove like proprietary APIs in favor of like in the library, that's awesome.
Yeah. I think if you
also get server side props only works on pages, right?
Yeah.
So now you could do it on any component.
Yep,
it's pretty cool.
I think if you wanted static HTML for
like get static props at build time.
Or get server side props are still needed. The server components
for the initial
aren't about static HTML. They're about that tree.
Right.
So so I think you would still. I think you'd probably still use
for
both.
those. Yeah.
Also, too, I think the story is going to change a lot. A lot of calls to unstable this. And unstable that. So.
No, I know. It's funny because we're at the point where we're excited about this stuff, even though we did put it off for a while just because we were learning, focusing on the fundamentals. But I think they've pulled back a lot from doing it in public because people React is freaking massive, so people just run with it and then complain that it changes, even though they say it's unstable.
It's really a shame,
which I get, but it sucks for us.
Saw when I was researching this, there are a few people that are like really involved in these projects, and I was pulling up their Twitters and like searching their Twitters to just see how they were talking about this stuff, what words they were using.
Yeah.
And there was like a tweet I found where someone was complaining, and there was a response. It's like, look, we don't like talking about this stuff in public because people, that's exactly what you said. People complain. I don't get why suspense isn't ready yet.
Yeah.
And so
that's not why we're talking about it though, but yeah, you can get it. So they just stopped talking about it.
Yeah. Which kind of, I will say that the React working group, which we'll link in the show notes, it's a GitHub repo with just the discussions tab. Yeah. And they only allow certain people to participate in it. So people like you and I are not allowed, which makes it, it's really high quality. There's not a lot there, but the signal to noise ratio is really good. Yeah. And people that work on React have taken a lot of time to like answer questions. By the way, like these things, like when I was reading them, all these ideas are so new. And I also didn't understand how these things tie together. Like I didn't understand how suspense for data fetching ties into server components. Right. So you have to read, I had to read things like literally like 3 times to grasp it. But really, it's really good. It's really good. And I feel like they're more open about talking about it rather than on Twitter. Yeah. So, I'm excited, man.
Yeah, no, it is cool.
Is cool.
It is cool. It is cool. No, there's been sometimes I've been talking with them on Twitter, and they're like, someone else says like, I've been using it, it's ready, and then one of them will be like, believe us, like what else can I say? It's not ready. Yeah, I know you can use it, kind of, but it's not ready. So like, I don't know what else to tell you.
The thing is though, like the stuff that we were using suspense for, like that's
it is
we
ready,
know,
but
we know like with this transition stuff, I know the mistakes that we're making, but I can also tell you that like the benefits far outweigh these mistakes. So I would feel okay using suspense on a project,
on a client project, not on a client project.
When React 18 comes out.
When React 18 comes out.
Right now we would have to
suspense for data fetching, even if they said it wasn't ready.
Okay. So first of all, I would suspense for data fetching would be use SWR suspense true, which I would feel okay with. Because
they have tests for sure.
Because I know that if you needed to do a refresh or something that invalidates the cache in a transition, I would say like we can't use a transition. You just have to like use revalidate
refetch,
from
mutate or whatever,
whatever it is from. Use SWR, and you just call that an event handler, and you don't get to wrap it in a transition. Right. But it's been a fun last 2 weeks, because I think if I started talking about this stuff 2 weeks ago, I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" Which I'm sure how people feel now.
No, it is super cool. React 18 is in release candidate, which we found a post from that discussions thing talking about the difference, because on the podcast recently we were like, what's the difference between alpha, beta, and release? And release candidate is basically like feature freeze and just stability. So it doesn't have suspense for data fetching, and I don't even know if it does have start transition. So that's cool. So you can use that.
Everything I did in my video you can do in React 18. It's just if you start to like invalidate.
I mean, I think they would say that you can't. I think they would say you can't use suspense for anything other than React that lazy, because there's a possibility that you
cache,
exactly. But no, if you don't if you know how to avoid that foot gun, then you can use it.
Also too, like just backing up here, I think the way you avoid the foot gun is you use SWR, Apollo. You just use those, and you opt into the features that are in those things, because those guys are
they're going to have tests and everything. They're going to have documented public APIs.
Right. Exactly. Documented public APIs. And if they say this is experimental.
No, it's just like using Zustand and Valtio. Like that's a way to get global state, and like you can't just go from the way you do global state in React 17 to React 18 without doing the whole like sync external store. But those libraries will know that, and they specify which versions of React they work with. So you don't have to know that. And so in the same way, you could use the features they expose, and then once the cache and validation comes to React, they're going to make an update that says, okay, if you're on React, whatever, use this. So no, it's cool though. Living on the edge, man.
Yeah.
After a long time of not, it's fun. It's fun learning about it. No, I think, someone on one of my videos or on Twitter was like, talking about how like, man, this seems like a lot of work to avoid a spinner.
Yeah.
And, it's good to draw it back to like the actual problems people face, because it's not always just about that. Obviously there's a lot of depth here, but like, for example, in the last my last video on like removing loading spinners and like staying on the last page until the new data for the route is ready came from a real person trying to do that in the Discord. And like, if transition worked with NextRouter, like it would be a mind-blowing thing to see.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not even a Next API is amazing, because you can do it in any React framework. And every React developer will eventually know how to do that. So that's awesome. So like, there's a lot here because it's experimental, but like it does solve real world problems, I
think that transition with a router is going to be the thing that's not supported for a while, because ultimately that's data fetching, because you're suspending the route transition to fetch data.
Right.
And you need a cache. So
right.
I think it's literally like you can only use React dot.
Yeah, so if you transition to a component that needs code, you can actually wait for the code to be ready. But who cares about that? Because that's not usually the thing that's going to be what blocks the transition.
And maybe there's like some small answer. There could be like some small answer that's like gets us. Yeah, we'll wait and see when these things come out.
Yeah.
I am ready to get back to
get
back to the real, come back to earth.
Right. Exactly.
I was on that point about it seems like a lot of work just to avoid a loading spinner. There's a tweet from I think Ben, and it's actually a great tweet. I put that in our podcast topics.
Oh, cool.
Because it's a great tweet.
Yeah.
Because it's like, wait, you have to know everything just to like not show a loading spinner.
Right.
But I think when you see the transitions and you see that you can keep an old UI rendered while your data fetches.
That's the part of your video, the 4-minute mark in
click.
your video where like you're interacting with the old screen and you're still using the carousel while the new data is loading is like, this is crazy. How would you do this?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, and the guy I was talking to on Discord was saying like, man, I was trying to explain my thought process of how I would like prefetch and like warm the cache. So like when you click on it, you don't see it. And he was like, man, this is a lot. Like I'm coming from Nuxt, which is like the Vue version of Next. And he's like, they have this built in. It'd be interesting to see if they like do that where they keep the old Vue responsive and they can discard the transition and stuff. But yeah, it's just, React, JavaScript people love their hackers, so it's like sometimes you need that hacker mentality. I guess.
Nice little React vacation.
Yeah, I had an idea for an app, and I was thinking I'm getting back into like the strength program at the gym, and so I want this like thing where you track your 1-rep maxes, and I was like, am I really wanting to learn brand new technology? No, on the one hand, but on the other hand, like it'd be cool to do it as like a remix app with Prisma.
Yeah.
Because I've never done either of those before, and just see. Because like I just spent a bunch of time on my like fitness app getting things working, and I was like, what if I just tried that and just super happy path? It might be fun,
Yeah. I do. The remix stuff looks
for like getting an app done.
It looks promising.
It does look really cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to play with that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and then I guess we've been going, so we'll wrap up here soon. We want to start, speaking of like, we need to get better term. Like middle class people might think that's like a disparaging term, but it's not.
We do look down on them. So
we actually love like teams that are. It's very easy, especially if you're like us and you spend a lot of time on Twitter and you're working with experimental stuff and you listen to like JavaScript podcasts, like you're a huge nerd like we are, and everyone listening to this. Most developers are not doing that. And most developers are at companies where they're working on apps and just trying to get like a list of people to filter and sort or whatever. So we've had this idea for like this new kind of mini course we want to work on, which is like, kind of some of this real world stuff. We work on a lot of back office apps, a lot of our experiences with like internal apps. We talked about that last week a bunch and what that's like. So we were thinking about doing like, in addition to the YouTube stuff, we've been doing like a little mini course where we build a demo in Next with some features like querying and sorting and filtering that's tied to the URL. We got this idea from some stuff that people were talking about in the Discord for Next, and it came up a lot when we did Ember Consulting. And just how, like, because SPAs are on the client, you can update the UI and then choose whether or not you update the URL. And like that makes it seem like such a small decision, but it's actually a huge decision, because when you update the URL, you've added a new entry point to your app. You've added multiple ways to get there, back, forward, client-side navigation, or a reload. And it can depend on the state on the server. It can depend on the state on the client. And so we always think this always comes up as like one of those big, again, middle class, like everyday dev problems. That's like, we want to make something that's a little bit more like thorough to hopefully like have a thing to share with people who run into this.
Yeah. Like how we think about that stuff too. Like we would think about like a state update getting like kind of like reflected and serialized into the URL.
Right.
And then that flowing back down into the UI.
Right.
And the UI updating and responding to that. So there's a ton of benefits like reloads.
Yeah. It's like you set a filter by clicking a button and you use React set state. And then your product manager's like, okay, can we make the URL update so like you can share that? And so people think, because that's the order in which they do things sometimes.
Dude, that would, by the way, that would be the dream if you're describing it like it's happened. What would happen is you would set state, grab the URL, email it to your colleague would load it, looking at a completely different screen, because like the state
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
You guys
like
talk past each other for 2 days.
Exactly. So like that's the order that a lot of the times the features are built. You build the thing using local state, and then afterwards someone wants you to have the URL work. And so the natural way that people think about doing it sometimes is by like syncing the React state to the URL, but then you've forgotten the other direction. And now you have two sources of truth. So the way we always talk about this is like, if the URL is the entry point, the source of truth should be in the URL, and everything down here should be derived from it. Basically, you have a single source of truth. And it's just a lesson you learn once you do this enough, but like it'd be fun to make like a series that's really like crystallizes this.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger architectural change when someone says, let's move that to the URL or have the URL reflect that, than it seems at first.
Yeah.
Because you could already have your entire architecture that's being driven from React state. But as soon as the source of truth needs to be the URL, you need to rethink all of that, you know? Mm-hmm. And especially in like, even, and then it just has bigger changes than people think. Like in Next, if you're navigating to a new URL that now has a new query param, like it might be like async or happen on an X frame in which you need to derive new information from the new URL. So it just might have bigger implications on the way you've coded the app than you first think. And so this idea of like the route being the entry point, deriving all data from the source of truth, the URL, which you don't own, the user owns the URL, you don't as the programmer, and all that good stuff. So that's if we decide to start working on that, we're going to be talking about that a little bit and posting some of those on our YouTube. So that should be fun. I think it'd be a fun little one to work on. It'd be nice to have it just to send people to.
Dude, this middle class stuff that we talk about, it's like the problems that we face. Like I can go research like server components and talk to you about it. And it's fun. It's great podcast content. But like when we're doing our day-to-day consulting, like these are literally the problems that we face.
Oh, totally.
Testing is a huge one. Like how do I write tests that are easy to write and valuable, and like what problems do they solve? Like what problems do they prevent?
Yep.
And there's so many decisions that you can make in testing.
Oh,
and the way you would test a library is different from the way you would test an app.
Right.
And so there's a lot of these
problems.
Yeah.
Good form abstractions. I mean, I was just like, I'm adding a sign up form to my like fitness app side project that has sign in. And it's like, I've been down the road so many times of doing different form abstractions. I really don't want to screw this up, but somehow I know I'm going to.
You know, I think today, like my form abstraction, I would just say,
copy the HTML.
Copy the HTML. I think I would nudge towards like React hook form and its defaults, and not because I feel like that's the best or better than. By the way, you tell someone how to do forms, and like you just you mentioned forums on Twitter and you have like 8,000 replies.
Yeah.
If you want to increase your Twitter engagement, just talk about forums.
React, go.
There's something I like about, like, this is a middle class thing that we run into, but like, I want like doing what's popular and doing what has really good documentation and what has like tons of questions and answers on Stack Overflow is like a really good thing. And so that's why I would like nudge towards hook form.
React hook form is great. I was even talking more about the actual UI side, like making composable UI form components. Like I have a form here. I want to do another one. So you have like an input component, you know, UI input or whatever, and it has some classes, but like it needs to work in like a horizontal form. And then like, you know what I'm saying? It's that kind of stuff. And you can just copy and paste it. It's just forms get verbose very quick. So I find in my side projects, it's one of the earliest parts I'm nudged towards wanting a design system like abstraction where I want reusable UI components, you know, because if you have like 2 forms with like 5 fields, it's fine to have them just inlined, you know what I'm saying? But it's also like, it gets, if you want to change it, it gets hard.
Yeah.
Pretty quick.
Yeah. It's so funny because like you go one way, you can go the other.
I know.
Like,
we've been down both.
Like if I think if your UI patterns and your designs are like well known, then going for like that design system style component can be.
And I wanted to try that, like being more constrained, you know, because it's my project and I'd rather just be able to make forms faster, you know, so
there's definitely been times I've been on projects where it's like brand new page, brand new design, brand new form, like build this, and you don't. It's like the worst feeling to like
have to
like edit a component and provide like overrides. You just feel like I'm like. Yeah, it's like bad abstraction. No abstraction is better than bad abstraction.
Big time. But yeah, we'll see. It'll be fun if we work on a client project like this year, you know, where it's like a big project that has like that, because we haven't done that in a while. Well, I mean, I guess most of the projects we've had have done it, but we haven't had like a fresh take on it now after, you know what I mean? Like last time we built one of those was like, we've learned a lot since then and had more experience and had more opinions about it. So
dude, there's time. I mean, there are times where they're really good. Like where your designers are constrained, like at TED, the designers like purposely constrain themselves.
Right.
And so it was good. Like
they literally use like TED Bootstrap to build this. Like,
and they had in Sketch, they had symbols for all this. So they were like, you're just using symbols. Yeah. It's all, I mean, it's like constraints, right? Yeah. Constraints are awesome. So
cool.
Okay.
Wrap it? Yeah. Nice. Well, I didn't know we were going to be talking about server components the whole time. We have some other fun things to talk about, but I guess we'll have to save those for next episode.
Yeah, I know. We want to talk about stuff.
That was good. I'm going to have to check out some of those pages. We'll be sure to link them all in the docs, but or in the notes for the episode. But that was a fun one. Cool. All right. Time to make some videos. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye.